Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. At this time, we're going to go ahead and get started. And as the bus arrives, they'll file into the sides. We don't want to keep you waiting any longer. But thank you for your patience. Welcome to the 2015 Naval Academy Leadership Conference, Leading in an Interconnected World. Before we get started, I'd like to remind everyone to please silence your cell phones and refrain from using them during the speaking events. In September of 2014, the class of 1938, our conference co-sponsors, lost a distinguished classmate. At this time, on behalf of the Naval Academy Leadership Conference, it is my honor to dedicate this year's conference in memory of Rear Admiral Paul G. Schultz.
It is with great honor that the 2015 Naval Academy Leadership Conference dedicates this conference to the late Rear Admiral Schultz. Rear Admiral Paul G. Schultz, United States Navy retired, died on Friday, September 25, 2014 in Bradenton, Florida. Born in Alabama in 1916, he was appointed to the Naval Academy in 1934 from New Mexico and graduated second in the class of 1938. He rode stroke on Navy's varsity crew team, winner of the Intercollegiate Regatta in June 1938 at Poughkeepsie, New York, and was later elected to the Naval Academy Athletic Hall of Fame. Upon graduation, he was assigned to the USS Arizona, serving as a junior division officer and radio officer. From 1940 to 1943, he attended MIT, where he earned a Master's of Science degree in Naval Construction and Marine Engineering. He was then assigned to Portsmouth Naval Shipyard, first as Assistant Hull Superintendent in charge of construction of new submarines, and then as Machinery Superintendent. In December of the following year, Rear Admiral Schultz was assigned to the FMO Service Force Pacific, then to Service Squadron 10 Ulithi. In April of 1945, he was sent to Okinawa as maintenance officer with Service Division 104, where during the next year he supervised the repair of many ships damaged by suicide boats and kamikazes during the invasion of Okinawa and later by typhoons. For this work, he was awarded the Bronze Star with V for Valor. His later duty assignments included the David Taylor Model Basin, the Bureau of Ships, and back to the Portsmouth Naval Shipyard, where he was design superintendent and then shipbuilding and repair superintendent. During this time, most of his work involved the design and construction of submarines. In 1954, he was awarded the designation of Engineering Duty Officer qualified in submarines. From 56 to 59, he served as the Navy Assistant Deputy Chief of Staff, Research and Development, Field Command, Armed Forces Special Weapons Project, Sandia Base, New Mexico, and a member of the Joint Military AEC Special Weapons Development Board. After retirement in 1959, Rear Admiral Schultz was a program manager with United Aircraft Corporation in Connecticut. In 1961, he moved to Long Island, New York, first as engineering manager and then as vice president and general manager of the Hartman Systems Division of Figge International Incorporated in Huntington Station, New York. In December 1973, he retired again to Florida, where he worked part-time in real estate and as a residential property appraiser until 1981. Throughout his life, Rear Admiral Schultz was an avid golfer, having 3 holes-in-ones, 1 club championship, and shooting his age over 250 times between the ages of 81 and 91. Rear Admiral Schultz was predeceased in 2010 by his wife of 68 years, Teen Farwell Schultz. He is survived by a daughter, Judy S. Dewey, Glendale, Arizona, a son, Paul G. Schultz III, Palm Springs, California, and a sister, Frances S. Jennings, Roswell, New Mexico. His brother, Commander Jesse Z. Schultz, United States Navy retired, class of 1950, predeceased him in 1991. It is with great honor that we dedicate this year's conference in his esteemed memory.
Thank you. At this time, it is my pleasure to welcome the Naval Academy's 62nd Superintendent, Vice Admiral Walter E. Carter, Jr., to the stage.
Okay, good morning, everyone. It's my honor to welcome you here to the United States Naval Academy, and how exciting that you all braved this summer-like weather that we're experiencing out there. This is really a special couple of days that the midshipmen have put together, and before I make a couple remarks. I want to say thank you right up front to Mitch and Linda Hart, who are our primary sponsors. Mr. Hart's going to get up and say a couple words following myself, but without their generosity and the class of 38, who we just dedicated this 3-day conference to Admiral Schultz, there's no way that we could put this on. So Mr. Hart, thank you. Linda, thank you for not just being here, but the dedication of your time and your resources to put this together. And as I look across this audience here, this is clearly the most expansive and broad audience that we've had to date. Well over 200 of you are here from 60 different universities and colleges across the country. So that's really spectacular. And that type of outreach, not only for us here at the Naval Academy, but for your input from wherever university or college you come from, whether it be a military service academy, one of the other military academies, or the great colleges and universities that you each represent, to include our international perspective that is here in the audience today. So this is a special couple of days that will happen in the panels and the lectures, and I just want to give you a couple of ideas to think about as we go forward. You know, I've been in the Navy for 33 years. I graduated from here in 1981. This building was here when I was here. I've been flying off aircraft carriers most of my life, and I've had a chance to do a couple of different things besides just fly off at aircraft carriers. And as I think about the theme that we have here today, it just couldn't be more relevant. And as we think and sit here over the next couple of days, one of the most basic questions for any academic institution that deals with leadership training and education is, can you actually teach leadership? I mean, it's a relevant question, and it comes up every once in a while. And from my perspective, the answer is, quite honestly, no. You can't. Leadership is experiential. You have to be immersed into whatever it is that you're doing to really expand yourself and understand what your role as a leader is. Now, does that mean that you can't grow and understand the concepts of leadership? Absolutely not. And that is truly the crux of what we're bringing to the discussion today. All of this is information. It's background. It's food for thought. And it's very worthy discussion. Because whether you're a student of history to understand how we don't repeat the mistakes of the past, or try to understand the successes of the past, they are the things that will help us move forward and be better. Now, the world is changing. We are becoming more interconnected every day. And when you think about what it takes to be an effective leader, the value of information is truly power. And to be a good leader, really, it's all about the personal decision making. So as you go forward into these discussions, you think about the volume of information that you will have either today or tomorrow at your fingertips. It starts to bring in a couple of questions that we really have to be able to answer to ourselves. How do we pick out the right information in a large volume of information that could be presented to you? This idea that you can have too much information and get information overload and miss the most critical elements that will be part of making a decision. And then, of course, the element of time. How much time do you have to make a key decision? You're not going to always have that. So do you have to have a perfect set of all the right information to make a decision as an effective leader? These are elements that I think will be brought forth in the discussion in the next few days. And no matter how good our technology is, no matter how good the information age will become for all of us, the elements of being a good leader is still about personal characteristics and character development. Now, here at the Naval Academy, we use terms like duty, honor, loyalty. You know, it really doesn't matter what the ethos of where you come from or however you've been brought up or whatever the culture is of the organization that you're going to be in. At the end of the day, it's about who you are inside that helps shape you and determine the types of decisions that you're going to make, those foundational characteristics. I like to break them down into two simple words: strength and virtue. When I talk about strength of the brigade of midshipmen, I talk about strength in terms of strength of physical body, fitness, strength of mind, and strength of character. When I talk about virtue, I think of it in really two sets. One is a modern day definition, which is moral excellence. But then the other part of virtue is more in those classical virtues. And you can read about those. They cover things like wisdom, courage, patience, fairness, and humility. For us to be truly good leaders and to make the type of decisions that we want people to mirror us and to help shape the will of how we want our folks to follow us, if you don't have strength and virtue, you're really working behind the power curve. So it's all about those personal decisions, regardless of how much information you have, regardless how much time you have, and understanding how to take that and give your intent to those who you want to follow you. So those are just a couple of thoughts from me, from someone that's been out in the fleet, seen the oceans of the world. And now as I have the opportunity to lead this fantastic 169-year-old institution and see the bright faces of the midshipmen who come to school here every day, I'm so proud of what they have put together for this leadership conference. I ask you to stay engaged, get as much out of these next couple days as you can, and thank you for your support and thank you for coming. I look forward to seeing you over the next few days. And now, I think we're going to have a proper introduction for Mr. Hart. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Vice Admiral Carter, for your insightful remarks. And at this time, it is my pleasure to introduce our conference co-sponsor, Mr. Mitch Hart, a proud Texan and 1956 Naval Academy graduate.
Cannot tell you how excited Linda and I are that you're all here. You know, everybody's going to be preaching to you about who you are and what you are. But what you are is what you make of yourself. This is an opportunity for military, civilian, people from all over the country to get together and to know each other. Several of us in this room lived through the Vietnam War. During that time, I was already out of the Marine Corps, but I ended up speaking on college campuses numerous times. And my message always was, my country, right or wrong, my country. A lot of people disagreed during the Vietnam War, but a difference was made because military and civilians got together and know. Whatever you do in your life starts whenever you decide you want it to start. So nobody else is going to tell you how to do it. You're going to have to be exposed to everything you possibly can and hope that things like this mean something to you. Thank you for being here. It's Linda's my pleasure to have you, and it was our idea to have the civilians along with the military. Thank you very much.
At this time, it is my privilege to introduce our opening speaker. Pat Finn is a Senior Vice President of Cisco's U.S. Public Sector Organization. He leads the development of Cisco's sales, growth strategy, and integrated business plans for U.S. governments, educational institutions, and public healthcare. His public sector team focuses on innovation in areas including data centers, video collaboration, cloud computing, cybersecurity, and secure mobility in order to create solutions that range from connected classrooms to connected governments. He has personally represented Cisco at events on Capitol Hill and at the White House related to STEM, E-rate, inclusion and diversity, veterans, international affairs, and cybersecurity. In 2013, he was named winner of the Diversity Leadership Star Peer Award by Diversity Women, an award whose recipient has led the way in supporting and building a diverse work culture. Mr. Finn serves on the Cisco board, providing guidance on Cisco's philanthropic investments. Additionally, he is a board member of the USO, the Northern Virginia Technology Council, and is actively engaged with veterans organizations to assist returning veterans in securing employment. Mr. Finn holds a Master of Science degree in telecommunication and computer management from NYU Polytechnic University, as well as a Bachelor's of Science in Management Information Systems from Pace University. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Mr. Patrick S. Finn.
Thank you very much. Great job. Good morning. Just so that you know, I brought this up to convince you that I'm here to talk about technology. The thing that scares me the most is this, which is the flipper. Admiral Carter, Mr. and Mrs. Hart, faculty and students, it's an honor to be here. I am the Senior Vice President of U.S. Public Sector for Cisco. I became a Senior Vice President about 5 years ago. And I've been at Cisco for 19 years. When I became a Senior Vice President, the morning of the announcement, I turned to my wife of 22 years. I said, honey, in your wildest dreams, did you ever think I, Pat Finn, a kid from New York, would end up being a Senior Vice President at Cisco Systems? She came over to me, she held my face in her hand, looked me right in the eye and said, you're not in my wildest dreams. So if I'm not in her wildest dreams, I have no expectation to be in your wildest dreams. And so the goal of my talk for the next 60 minutes is to ensure that we have some interaction. And I'd like to tell you some stories about leadership. I'd like to tell you some stories about technology and kind of put it into perspective for you. But more than anything else, and I've got a couple of charts to kind of guide my thinking and my presentation, but more than anything else, I want to answer your questions. So leading in an interconnected world, Cisco Systems is responsible for doing an awful lot of the connections of everything from the mobile desktop to the data center. In the organization that I'm responsible for, there's about 3,000 people who touch my customer every single day. 3,000 livelihoods I'm responsible for. It's about a $5.5 billion piece of Cisco. Cisco's about a $50 billion company, and we're in business. That's what we do. But we take our mission very seriously. And we got together a couple of years ago when I took over public sector, and I said, it's not just about the equipment. It's not just about the technology. It's not just about what do we stand for. And we came up with our vision statement. Our vision statement is we help our customers transform the way they protect, serve, and educate. Because public sector, I'm responsible for state and local government, education, public health care, the federal government, including in civilian defense, intel, and some of the integrators. And so transforming the way our customers protect, serve, and educate really gives a rallying cry for what we need to do. And in this chart here, we talk about, we educate at Wharton School of University, where we bring the experts into the classroom. We use the technology to enable it. The technology doesn't do it. The people behind the education do it. We talk about protect, the first responders, the work that we've done, and I'll talk to you a little bit about some of the work we're doing with the responders to protect our citizens. We innovate, obviously, as an innovation company, but the technology doesn't protect. The technology doesn't educate. The technology doesn't innovate. It requires people to do this. So my organization and teams are focused on every aspect of protect, serve, and educate in the U.S. public sector, both in our state governments, our education systems, and in our federal government. They take their job seriously. And so as we transform the way we protect, serve, and educate, we do it through connecting, innovating, and leading. That's our mission. That's what we bring to the table. That's how we solve problems. And when you're in an interconnected world of 3,000 people all over the world, you really do need to make sure people understand the vision, the mission, and you need to have a rallying cry. And our rallying cry is one team, one fight, one Cisco. Which means when you show up for a customer, they don't really care what your title is. They don't really care what part of Cisco you work for. They don't care. You represent the whole company to them. And your job is to listen and help them solve a problem. And so we take this transforming the way our customers protect, serve, and educate very seriously. And we use technology to do this. And here's some examples, and we'll talk more about the examples. But how do you take technology and mix it in with leadership? And so I want to talk a little bit about that. And let me tell you about my first lesson in leadership. This is my dad. He was raised on a farm in Ireland. He emigrated to the United States in 1944 to join the military. He was not allowed in because he had one lung. He looked for work. I'll tell you how he ended his career, but he started his career driving the president of a Madison Avenue advertising firm, from Scarsdale to New York every single day. How many people have seen Mad Men, the show Mad Men? Well, that's the story of this gentleman's firm, but it's not he wasn't the type of man that depicted in Hollywood. The president of this firm was an invalid, and my father's responsibility every day was to take him from Scarsdale to New York. I learned that when I was 19 years old. I worked at IBM. I had just been promoted to a manager, and I was at a meeting in IBM's headquarters in Armonk, and I said to one of my team members, why don't we go see my mom and my dad? We'll have lunch there after this meeting. They were like, great. So I walked into my house, very proud, having just been promoted at the early age of 19. And I hadn't told my parents yet. And I walked into the living room, or into the kitchen, and my mother started busily getting ready for lunch. And I said, this is Frank Gillerin. Frank Gillerin works for me. And my father happened to be home, and he shook Frank's hand, and he said, Frank, sit down. We're going to have lunch together. Son, could I see you in the living room? I said, sure. I walk into the living room, and my dad said, when I came to this country, I drove the most powerful man to New York City every single day. At 5 a.m. in the morning, I showed up in his bedroom. I took care of him. I dressed him. I fed him. I drove him down to New York City. At 12 o'clock, I wheeled him from behind his desk, where he had been working from 9 to 12. I took care of him, I fed him, and at 1 o'clock I put him back behind his desk where he worked till 5 o'clock. And at 5 o'clock, I picked him up, I brought him to Westchester Country Club, where we together sat down and had dinner every single night, Monday to Friday. And at Westchester Country Club, it was the place where the senators, the governors, the doctors, the lawyers, all came to have dinner. And when they saw this man, they came over to his table, and my father's job was to pick him up so that he could shake these men and women's hands and look them eye to eye. And he said, Pat, when he introduced me, he said, have you met my friend Bill Finn? He didn't say, have you met the guy who works for me? He didn't say, have you met my chauffeur? He said, have you met my friend Bill Finn? And he said, you just introduced in your first management job somebody who worked for you. How good do you feel? I said, well, I felt good coming in. Not sure I'm going to feel that good going out. But his message was, it's not about your title. It's not about your ego. It's not about the position you hold, because at the end of the day, it's about the person who's working with you, shoulder to shoulder. It's about the person that you are supporting. And so as you work up in an organization, you have more and more people to support. So when I introduced myself, I said, I have about 3,000 livelihoods I'm responsible for. And those are just the people who work at Cisco, not their families. There's probably a lot more, and I take that job very seriously because he taught me my first leadership lessons, right? When I retire, it's not going to be about the title, about the number of people, about the money. It's going to be about the lives that I've impacted. And this farmer from Ireland who immigrated to the United States, that was one of the first leadership lessons he taught me. And unfortunately, he didn't stop there. He kept going. So for 25 years following that first one, he's been one of my heroes and somebody who's taught me a lot about leadership. And so from that base, I did a kind of a word Google on your conference over the next 3 days. And there are a lot of very interesting topics. There's a lot as it relates to, how do you manage and lead in a remote world? How do you use technology? What's this thing called perception and reality? And so I want to talk a little bit about that and hopefully prompt some questions. So these are all very interesting words. The thing that struck me the most before I get to technology, I want to talk about perception and reality. How many people have heard the phrase, perception is reality? BS. The opposite of perception is reality. Perception is not reality. So all of those folks who are bad at reality say, I want you to have good thoughts about me, because your good thoughts and your perception of me is really what's important. That's not leadership. That's not reality, because I can't tell what's going on in my team's mind. I don't know, nor should I really care how they think about me. The reality is we have a job to do. The reality is we have a mission. And so I hope I'm not messing up some of the panels, but in my mind, perception is the opposite of reality. And so if you're searching for an authentic leadership style, why worry about what people think? Why use the senses to determine what leadership is all about? And then I said, well, if the opposite of perception is reality, what's the opposite of leadership? And I know that last year there was a talk on the opposite of leadership, and in my mind, I first thought that the word was incompetence, and one of my team members said, no, there's a lot of incompetent leaders, and he was looking at me in such a way that I thought he was talking about me. So we had a little bit of discussion about that. And then I said, well, no, leadership is really the opposite of leadership is ignorance, right? Because the most important attribute of a leader in my mind in the work that we do is self-awareness. Are you aware of who you are and how you show up? Because I agree that leadership can't be taught, but if you know how you are and who you are, it makes it a lot easier to understand this thing called leadership. And so at the end of the day, it's about authentic. It's about being self-aware, because that self-awareness is the leadership journey. Whether you can be taught it or not is really up to you. My father taught me a lot of valuable lessons as it relates to leadership. And I will tell you quite frankly, I'm not the same leader that I was even 10 years ago, 15 years ago. And this came to light for me when I was responsible for New York City, for Cisco's business in New York City during the events of 9/11. Now, I don't talk a lot about this period. I think some of my team members probably don't hear me talk about what we did to bring New York City back to life. But there was a lot of leadership being demonstrated all over New York City, and I know in Washington and in the fields of Philadelphia and other places, there was a lot of leadership. And so what was Cisco's role? Cisco's role was to bring New York City back from a technology perspective, to create communications. That was our role. And I remember when it all happened, and we're walking to a group of us. Well, the morning started out with 4 leaders all together, huddled, as we had just learned about what happened. We actually had seen it on the TV. And I said to the person in charge, you need to call the president of Cisco. I turned to the other person and said, you need to monitor what's happening on TV, and as you find out information, get it to us. And I said to the third leader, you need to get all of the employees into the front conference room to make sure that they don't go out on the streets, because we had no idea what was going on. And then I said, ready, break. Now, I wasn't the senior-most person in the room, but the senior-most person said, what are you going to do? And I said, I'm going to call Mike Quinn in California, because He was a Marine and he was in the CIA, and he'll know what to do. And he'll create a war room for us that'll allow us to get out of this thing. And it was a great start. So we kind of all went into our own direction, and I assigned the wrong person the job of getting the employees to the conference room. You think that would have been the easiest job. I assigned the wrong person because as I had finished my task, I was going to see the employees, and they were all running for the elevator. And I turned to him, I said, "What are you doing?" He said, "There's nothing I can do." I said, "We don't know what we're sending them into. They want to get home." I said, "We want to get them home safely." And I looked at one person as he was running to the elevator. I grabbed him. I said, "Where are you going?" And he says, "I'm going down to this site." And I said, "Why are you doing that?" He said, "Those are my brothers and sisters. I need to go help them." And there was no stopping him, because he said, "If you don't let me go, I'm going to punch you." And I said, "I'll let you go under one condition, that you call me every hour." And he called me every hour, and we created a response that blew my mind. The leadership that showed up, the people that were there in response to our customers, and what we did for the mayor's office and the police station, it just gives me chills to this day. And right after kind of this, everybody settled down, we got the employees that were left, and we're walking towards a ferry. And we're all walking together, and as I'm walking to the ferry with all of the executives, I said, "What am I doing? I'm leaving the island. If I leave the island, there'll be nobody here. I'm staying." So I let everybody get off the island, and I stayed in order to support what was going on. And I got back to the office, and the phone's ringing. And it's the president of Cisco, John Chambers. And he's a West Virginian, and he says, "Pat, good to hear that you're still there. I had a kind of feeling that you'd probably be there. Anyone with you?" I said, "Yeah, there's a couple of people. There's a lot of people who are with the police and the mayor's office." He said, "Pat, I need you to go get the New York Stock Exchange up and running." And I said, "John, that's impossible. The New York Stock Exchange is not our customer. They won't even let us in. We don't list on the New York Stock Exchange. We list on the NASDAQ." And he said, "Pat, remember one thing that you told me about the economy of the United States?" I said, "Yes, John." "Do you remember what you said?" I said, "Yes, it's all about two things: relationships and confidence." He says, "If we don't get the New York Stock Exchange up by Tuesday, we will have ruined the confidence of the United States." He says, "You're responsible for getting it up." And he goes, I said, "John, any ideas how to do that?" He goes, "Use your relationships," and hung up the phone. The biggest asset I had at the time was my engineers. And so the next day, I was able to get 25 engineers, and we walked into the New York Stock Exchange. And as we were walking in, actually it was later on that night, but as we were walking in, one of them said to me, loud enough for all of us to hear, "What are we supposed to do here?" I said, "If they ask us to sweep the floors, sweep the floors. If they ask us to pull cables, pull cables. If you see something that needs to get done, get it done." And I said, "We're not leaving until this is up, or that we have not been successful on Tuesday." And there was no other company that showed up with 25 smart people and one manager. That was me. I was the one manager with 25 smart people. And this team worked around the clock for 5 or 6 days and brought the New York Stock Exchange up and running, not one piece of Cisco equipment. And so when I say we transform the way our customers protect, serve, and educate, it's not just about the almighty buck. It's about having bigger meaning, and it's about reality, and it's about leadership. It's about being authentic, and it's about being self-aware. What can I do? What are my assets? This problem has occurred. What can I do to respond to it? Because doing nothing is an excuse. No excuses. And so perception, the opposite of perception is reality. Perception is not reality. The opposite of leadership is ignorance. And if you're not self-aware, you will live from ignorance. And that ignorance could be called ego. That ignorance can be focused on the almighty buck. That ignorance could be a lot of things. So how does technology play? Well, I told you some stories about how technology brought some communications back, brought confidence back, helped us build relationships. But if you're a bad leader, technology only spreads that to more people. If you're a good leader and you can scale your good leadership, then you trust, you empower the leaders to know what they need to do. It enhances your tone. It doesn't create the tone. So if you're a dictator, it will enhance your dictatorship. If you're a collaborative leader, it will enhance that tone. It will obviously allow you to connect with people, many, many people. And it will change the conversation. It should change the conversation. Technology allows you to do that. Now, in an interconnected world, how this all happens, in the words of cyber and the fear of communicating and putting things online, becomes a real interesting balance. So this is what technology does. It allows you to scale your message, scale your benefits, it allows you to enhance your tone, connect with people, and change conversation. So one of the things that I do when I'm talking to my leaders, the last leadership meeting I had, 80 people showed up that work in my organization. And when we started talking about how we're hiring people, how do we hire vets, how do we hire diversity, and for those that are graduating and going for interviews, I have one interview question. What are the 7 words that describe you? Or phrases, 7 phrases that describe you. A friend of mine, Harry Campbell, created a website, 7 words about me. Sounds a little ego, but it's not. Basically, in this website, you pump in names, email addresses of people that you work with. And they are sent an email, which they fill in 7 words about you. And it comes back and it said, responder number 1, doesn't give names, responder number 2, responder number 3. And it's interesting, you have to do your 7 words before you ask 25, 100, or 200 of your friends about what are the 7 words that, and the question is, what are you experiencing about me? What's your reality about how I operate? And so Harry Campbell actually built this website. Harry Campbell was at Procter & Gamble. He did some leadership work for me at probably the lowest point that my team ever was in our history, because a lot had just happened to them. We didn't have a way forward. We were sitting together building it, and he gave us 7 words about me. How do we describe who we are? And he also said, get over it, get on with it, and make it a win. And so we took our situation, we got over it, we got on with it, we made it a win. He gave us this gift, and I give it to you now. Anyone can use it, because it's interesting. Again, we're not feeding into perception, but it's interesting to see as a leader how people are dealing with you. And you don't even know who, unless you send it to one person, then you obviously know. If you send it one at a time, you're going to know who did it. But I sent it to 30 people last night. I've already got a couple of responses. But in an interview, before I go into an interview, what do I want people to know about me? Right? How do I want to direct that conversation? What are the 7 words that make up who I am? And so these are my words or phrases about myself. If you don't have integrity, you don't have anything. Period, end of story. I am straightforward and direct. Learned it from my dad, grew up in New York. If you're not straightforward and direct, you're confusing. I am tough but fair. which means I can be wrong, but you have to prove it. You have to have the facts. And how we deal with people has all got to be about fairness. Got to be authentic. You've got to be the real you. If you're not, then you can't lead 3,000 people all over the globe. Because remember, when you're using the telepresence or the video conferencing, if you're fake, they will experience fake. If you're authentic, they will experience authentic. And that comes true on the types of questions you get asked, and I'll tell a story about that at the end. I am very inquisitive, which means I don't know everything, but I better be surrounded with people who do know everything, because we got jobs to do. And not that everyone should know everything about everything, but hey, I don't know, I'll go get you that answer is the best response to anything. But inquisitive, team-oriented, it's about the team, period, end of story. And results-oriented. We are not a charity at Cisco. We have a mission, we have a goal, but we better have results that include how we make money, but also how we actually show up in our community. And so how do we actually measure those results? Those are the 7 words, and since I did this last night, new words are coming into me every moment. I was just looking at the webpage, and all it does was it gives you a dashboard of the words that people are experiencing. And it's good to hear, because then I say, oh, you know what, I need to go work on that, or I need to understand what that means. And not that it's, if one person says he's a clown and everybody else says he's humorous and funny, you kind of have to put that in perspective, right? So you don't kind of zero in on just the negative, you look at both the positive and the negative. Hopefully this is a tool that you could use. Use it in interviews, use it in discussions, because if you don't know what you're made of, even on an interview without any technology, you're going to come across in the way that may be confusing. All right? These are our core values. Customer first, one team, one fight. When 2 teams are squabbling in front of me, I leave the room. I was in a staff meeting 2 quarters ago, 6 months ago, and we had just made a really important decision, which means we were about to make major investments in a particular direction that the team was going to go in because the customer demanded it. Not San Jose, not headquarters, but the customer was demanding it. And we knew that if we didn't make this investment, or we slowed up on the investment, we could either be out of a market or we would be in catch-up mode. And so we talked about it. We had talked about this investment 3 months prior, and we all agreed that this was the right thing to do. We're going in this direction. We had dialogued about it. We had debated it. We had discussed it. We had made the decision that this is what we're going to do. So now it's time for what? Execution. So 6 months, or 3 months after, 6 months ago, staff meeting, I said, okay, we're going forward. I want to hear one sentence from everybody on how they're going to execute the decision that we made 3 months ago. Started off with my leaders. Got to one leader and said, well, I don't know. Well, you don't know what? Well, I have to have a discussion with Carl before I move forward. It's like, okay, leave the room now. We're going to put the meeting on hold, go have the discussion, and come back and tell us that we're ready to execute. Oh, no, I don't need to do that. We can take it offline. Oh, yes, we do. We need to do it right now. Because if we don't do it right now, we will not be in execution mode, and we will not be rowing together. One person will see a different view of it. And change is the most difficult part of leadership. Change management is the most difficult process. So if one person has a different view, then we're sunk. And so I said, we're stopping the meeting. Go get it done. So they came back and we were green light again. Now, why did I do that? Well, because we all have this natural conversation about dialogue, debate, discussion, decision. You know what? Let's have a dialogue, debate, discussion, decision again. You know what? Let's have a dialogue, debate, discussion, decision again. And so you go into this endless loop. And what happens? You never get to execution. And so getting to execution is what leaders are all about, in changing the game to get to execution. And sometimes it has to be a group process. And so customers first, one team, one fight. That means everybody's together on it. They don't need to agree, but they say, I'm going along. I'm supporting the team. We're going to do it. I'm part of the execution. Because if they're not part of the execution, they're standing on the sidelines. I can't afford to have people stand on the sidelines. Don't be afraid to fail, but never lose alone. Failing is critical to our education, both as what we're trying to accomplish and leadership. Why did we do that? Let's do a debrief. My analogy about this is, it's not about the bad golf shot. I sure as hell hit more bad golf shots in my life. It's about the next shot that you take. And so don't be afraid to fail, but don't hide that you failed either. But don't lose alone, because you can get some synergy. Well, what do you think? Why did that happen to us? And then you have the second shot. But if you lose alone and you don't admit that you failed, you're trying to figure out how to get ahead without having integrity. Really important. And then find your core values. What are your core values? That's the one thing about dealing with the military. There's great core values. We're setting it up so that we know how to lead. Make sense? Questions? So it's not just about the technology. The way we approach problems is people first, process, and technology. Questions? Give me your name and where you're from, if you don't mind.
So Shane Bill Walsh from United States Naval Academy of San Diego, California. So what does Cisco do to foster an environment for the technological collaboration with employees?
Great question. Did everybody hear the question? What do we do to foster technological innovation and collaboration with our employees? The good news is we make the stuff. So we make voice, video, and data products that allows us to distribute to all of our employees. And so I'd say probably over 90% of every employee has a Cisco phone both at their office and at their home. Most of them have video conferencing capability everywhere. In fact, on that device, I can do a video call to any of the employees at Cisco, as well as any of the 650 conference rooms. And so I can get pulled into calls or situations at any point in time, which is both a blessing and a curse, right? Because there's some meetings that you don't want to be in, but sometimes they pull you in, right? And so that's the first thing we do, is that we provide the technology for our employees to do that. We're in the collaboration business, and that again acts as a double-edged sword, because you can over-collaborate and get nothing done. And there sure as hell is a lot of corporate meetings about understanding what's going on in the field, very similar to what's going on in your business, right? And so a lot of folks have to show up and ensure that we're educating, but at the end of the day, collaboration for collaboration's sake is no benefit. So collaboration for execution is really important. So once you provide the infrastructure, you also have to have the process to ensure that you're focused on what the outcome is. And so we're very, very outcome and results focused. We created a couple of years ago, came down from the president, that every organization needed to have a vision, a strategy, execution components, and then finally measurements in order to ensure that we're in a direction. And what we realized is what was missing from that was that collaboration piece. And so we had the best equipment to collaborate, but we weren't collaborating. We weren't acting as one team, one fight. Let me tell you what I mean by that. In the 3,000 people that work in the U.S. public sector that touch my customers, they don't all report to me, thank God. Probably only half do, and then the other half are part of 10 or 12 different organizations. What was happening with the VSEM is that the vision, the strategy, the execution, and the metrics is that everybody was creating it and going off in their own direction. And so what we did is we created an additional process to pull them back together again. And the way we were able to pull those organizations back together again is tell us what your dependency is as part of your VSEM, because you can execute your organization's vision and impact the whole. And so you've got to be clear not just what your VSEM is, but you also have to tell us how you're helping the overall strategy and what your dependencies are on other organizations. And in my organizations, we call that operationalizing the strategy. We have a one-pager that every leader needs to submit in addition to their VSEM to actually pull people together. And I can do a review on what the priorities are and how we actually measure those priorities. And is everybody on the same page related to it? And is everybody working for the same priority, or are they working against each other? And so that's the topic of our discussions and our leadership meetings. What are you doing? What's your focus? How are you interacting with other people? And that's what I call good collaboration. When you just show up for a meeting and you have no idea what the meeting is for, but they want you on the call, that's bad collaboration. So we have the equipment. Sometimes the technology is used to help us, and sometimes the technology is used against us. But there's probably, right now, in my organization alone, there's probably, right this second, probably over 2,000 calls, conference calls. I'm talking about more than 3 people going on right now. So we're communicating all the time. Does that answer your question?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Morning, sir. I'm Midshipman 3rd Class Koenig from the Naval Academy.
And where are you from?
The Naval Academy here.
Okay. But where did you come before
Ohio.
the Naval Academy?
Ohio, sir.
Because before Cisco, I came from New York.
Ohio, sir.
Ohio? A Buckeye.
Yes, sir. As one of the biggest problems we see with modern technology is that it can be exploited to reveal sensitive information about the people that use it. So what does Cisco do to ensure that the data is protected of their clients?
Yes, so thanks for hitting on the number one topic as it relates to communications and data is cybersecurity. And everybody is talking about cybersecurity and security. So we have been a leading provider of security products for the last 10 years. And in most of our markets, including security, we're number 1 or number 2 related to that particular focus area. So cybersecurity is one of my priorities, as you might imagine, because of the scope of responsibility being U.S. public sector, federal being a critical component of that. What we realized is we had the ability with our technology to build walls and to allow people to communicate and punch holes through those walls. But that becomes a very interesting game, right? And so how do you really communicate effectively in this new world? And the problem is not about building walls. The problem is about finding the needle in the haystack, finding the bad person doing bad things, finding corrupt information, finding the digital tsunami that's about to hit a particular customer or a particular nation. And so about 5 years ago, I brought 5 really bright cybersecurity experts together, both inside Cisco and outside Cisco, and I said, what do we need to do here? Because at the end of the day, we've connected it all. We know we have information on the sensors. We can actually take a look at this. And we realized that inside Cisco there was some projects, outside Cisco there was some companies, and then there was some technology that we could partner with. And so what we did was we purchased a company called SourceFire. And SourceFire had a whole different approach to cybersecurity. And the way they described it, they also had a lot of technology and a lot of smart people. So that was the first thing we did. We bought a company that made us smarter. And their approach was, you do something different before the attack, meaning, and you all in military know this, you act one way before the attack. During the attack is the second phase of this thing. It's a whole different types, different tools, different people, different process. And then what do you do after the attack? And instead of cybersecurity being this one big thing, we broke it into those 3 simple components, got people working on those 3 different components, realized what technology we had because we couldn't buy every cyber company on the planet. We decided then to partner. We said, you know what, there's somebody who's analyzing all the data on a particular customer's network that can come in and plug in a tool. We can actually partner with that company, bring it to our customers, and help them solve problems. And so we've done that in quite a few companies we've brought to the table to help find the needle in the haystack or look at the digital tsunami. The third thing we've done is we've hired some, the last company we purchased was just brilliant people who can go to our customers and help them understand what's going on in their particular environment, as well as what's going on in the broader situation. And then I have a government affairs office and a bunch of lawyers who spent a lot of time on Capitol Hill, who try to educate those folks about what it means to allow us to do our work and to not take over the development of our technology. Let us run it, but let us make sure that we're doing it in a safe and secure way. You know, what I said about confidence and relationship, cybersecurity deteriorates those 2 very important things. And so it's a huge focus for Cisco. So we're doing an awful lot in the classified and the unclassified area along those ways. New ways of thinking about things, intelligent people, companies that we've purchased, and partners.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. We can go into a lot of detail also about how we're handling sensors, but I think we'd lose the audience. Sorry.
Morning, sir. My name is Midshipman First Class Tyler Heinemar. I'm from the Naval Academy, and I hail from San Antonio, Texas.
San Antonio, Texas.
So something that I wrote down, I know a lot of people in the back row did write down. We liked your story with your father and not introducing somebody as, this is X who works for me, this is my friend so-and-so. And my question relates to technology as a whole. How do you give individual people that way of connecting with you as a senior vice president? How do you get that connection to get your followers at the lowest level to look up to you and see the kind of leadership that you embody?
Those are the people I work for at the very lowest level. And so it's a great question. The way I use technology, so the week before Thanksgiving, as I was going out on a 3-city tour, my wife turned to me and said, "This is 50. And I thought she was talking about my age. And I said, "What does that mean?" She said, "This is the 50th week that you've been on the road." So I think that there's nothing more important than face-to-face communication. And so what I said earlier is it enhances the tone. It doesn't create the tone. And so you have to be shoulder to shoulder with your team in order to create the tone, and then you can use technology to enhance it. The other thing is, if you do have a team that's been together for a while, you have to trust your leaders, and they're out doing the exact same thing. And I know that because I talk to them every single day. And they'll tell me, "Hey, I need you to call this person," or "I need you to video conference with that person," or "just drop a voicemail to this person," or text. So we're big into every type of technology in order to connect with people. I will tell you a story. I do video roundtables. Even though I'm traveling, if I'm in Raleigh and there's a team meeting going on in California, a manager would say, "Hey, would you mind joining my meeting for a couple of minutes to answer questions?" I do that all the time. I do virtual roundtables all the time. And so I was in Raleigh. I found a video conferencing unit, which is another benefit of Cisco. I dial into this team meeting, and most people are quiet at first before asking them a question. And there was this gentleman, his name is Kyle Larrick. He didn't realize that he was just about to get promoted. but he had been working on a problem. And I said, is there any questions? I kind of gave a couple of comments about where we were with some of our priorities. And Kyle almost came through the video unit. His face was beet red. He was screaming at me. He was telling me that this problem that I've been working on for the last 6 months is impacting my customer, and the people in San Jose are just not doing their job, and the veins are popping. And I'm looking at him, and he's telling me all the nitty-gritty detail, and I'm nodding my head, and he turns to me and he goes, what do you have to say about that? And I said, you can't fix stupid. I said, sounds like we got some serious things, and it just relieved the situation. And he backed off, and he realized, well, he wasn't sure whether I was talking about him or the situation. Found that out later. And I said, so Kyle, how do you think we should solve the problem? What do you need me to do? And very clearly, after I kind of broke the ice, he quickly gave me the 3 things I need to do. I said, all right, I'll drop you a voicemail once those 3 things are done, and I'll tell you how I've responded. Now think about that situation. I wasn't just talking to Kyle. I was talking to the 40 people in the room, right? As it relates to how we actually address this. And I think leadership happens in 2 places. At crossroads, when you come up against crossroads, or when you're alone. Those are the 2 things where you really have to think about what's your leadership style. And if I didn't have an authentic approach, that would have backfired on me, right? You can't fix stupid. Somebody would have called San Jose and said, hey, Pat Finn called you stupid. And that has happened. And then next thing I get a call from a senior vice president who says, I understand that you called my organization stupid. And then you say, well, let's take a look at the problem. And this is the problem we're dealing about. So you may not be stupid, but somebody in your organization is practicing stupidity, right? So how do we actually solve this problem? And so it turns into a whole different type of discussion. So you can usually take the negative out of it if you're looking to solve a particular problem. But remember, you're not just talking to Kyle, you're talking to a larger audience. And video conferencing is another example that if you don't have it down, you just exemplified your ignorance, right? And I didn't know what the problem was, but by the end, he told me, and by the end of the day, I knew how to solve the problem, not necessarily all the details of the problem. And we were able to help him out. Worked out for him. Did that answer your question?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we're on this side.
Right.
You know what? The world is a terrible
They always
place,
put it
Pat.
to medium
Brandon.
height. So,
It's a
Brandon
terrible-
Carr from Princeton, New Jersey.
Princeton,
sir.
New Jersey.
Yes,
That's
sir.
right. Brandon gave me my 2 questions last week when I met Governor Christie. I was going to ask Governor Christie, do you hug outside of Dallas, Texas? And Brandon gave me 2 better questions to ask him. Thank you, Brandon.
My pleasure, sir. So, I understand when you're video conferencing, it's probably easy to get across your authenticity, your self-awareness, your confidence in your core values. You were telling me a humorous story about an MIT student who said that Cisco is the company that does its business through email.
Yeah.
So I've kind of a 2-part question. First is it possible to be authentic and self-aware when you have to communicate via email or via text?
No.
When it's just easier? It's
No.
not.
Email is the most, email, no matter, if you're trying to do something good in email, somehow people misinterpret what you say. So you can't be direct and use email as a style. If it's really, so email to me is just the ability to connect and communicate simple stuff. But if somebody's posing me a problem via email and it's 20 pages and long, I have to call the person and talk to the person because my response will never address the whole issue. So email, I think, is probably the most misused, misinterpreted tool, but it is the reason for the internet, right? And so I'm very careful with email because nobody gets my email. Nobody gets my jokes. Nobody gets my directness. Nobody gets, and what happens as a leader is people take these things and they go do things and you're like, well, what are you doing that for? Well, in your email you said, and I said, well, do you have a brain of your own? Why would you follow me on that front? That's not what I meant. So I get 3,000 emails a day on a good day. I maybe respond to 10 of them. But then I have a list of people I have to call. But I don't get to all of them. I think email is overused. I use text an awful lot. My messages in text are really getting good because I can zing somebody and then they'll respond in a way that I understand where they're at. Does that answer your question?
It does. Here's the second part. As a leader
Princeton
leading,
people always ask 2 questions.
Yeah.
Go on.
As a leader leading in that interconnected role, where you have a team around the world and you're trying to work through email and through text and through video conferencing, do you always have to be authentic, or is there a time you can think where you might not have to be?
I think you sometimes have to follow the rules whether you believe them or not. You sometimes have to carry the message whether you agree with it or not. You have to execute the decision. If the decision was not yours and some of your boss, you have to execute it. And there is a way to execute it without everybody knowing that you don't agree with it or not and still remain authentic. I think that that's the alone work that you have to do. But yeah, I mean, in general, you have to be authentic, because if somebody comes with a problem and you give them the corporate answer, they're never coming to you with a problem again. That's different than when you're being told you're going to go do this whether you like it or not. Yes, sir, we've got to go execute, or yes, ma'am, and then it's execution mode. What I think or how I feel is irrelevant, because if I don't, then I'm being passive aggressive and I'm going against what the decision is of somebody who has looked at it from a different perspective. If it turns out wrong, I don't relish in that. I now try to figure out how to put it back in line. And my job is to make sure I'm communicating the pros and cons of both. But if a decision is made, we've got to go execute. Make
Thank you,
sense?
sir.
And that's part of authenticity too, right? Because if you start pedaling backwards, you then have integrity issues, you have trust issues. That's not good either. And sometimes you have to say to your team, I know you don't like it, but we're getting it done. Period, end of story. Let's go. It's that's the way it is. But good question. I only have 5 minutes left, and so nobody from West Point has come up to ask me a question. So get yourself up here. He's gonna go next, and you'll get the microphone. I need somebody from West Point just to bring it up.
Morning, sir. I'm Francis Chen. I'm from Gordon Engineering Leadership Program at MIT. Thanks
Great.
for mentioning us.
Excellent. Well, an
And-
MIT student told me if I worked for an email company. I thought that was the best question that somebody had asked me. Go on.
I'm not going to ask you that one.
Okay.
My question, well, there's a sequence of 3 intimately related questions.
Okay,
As-
3 questions, New Jersey, 2 questions. Go on, MIT.
It's this. Do you believe that anyone can lead at the highest levels, like anyone? The second one, if not, how do you know?
Stop. I think that you can lead at the highest level if you're true to yourself and not true to the public or the masses or the issue of the day. If you have your core values and you have practiced executing your core values, you can execute at the highest level.
All right.
But if you're wishy-washy or if you're doing things for show or ego or PR, that's not good.
So that's how you know.
That's how you know.
And the last question is then, since you can't really learn leadership in a classroom and you have to practice it, how do you take that road to the highest levels of leadership?
You put yourself in awkward situations. Once you become comfortable with something, like leaving New York City for me was the hardest thing I ever did, because I loved New York City. I knew all my customers. I was in boardrooms. I was in, bar rooms. I was everywhere. I loved it. My team was just great. But I realized that I could only take it too far, and it's some time for somebody else. And I had to do something that people did not expect me to know how to do. And so I'm probably one of the few technology executives who have done both Wall Street and the White House. It's really, really difficult to do when you're not at a senior level, where you're actually executing and operationalizing a deal. I put myself in awkward situations. I hit the reset button probably 10 times in my career at Cisco in the last 19 years. And sometimes I felt like I was in the graveyard. And I said, it's all about leadership to get me back into something that I know that I can do and love and build a strong team. And so I would say put yourself in awkward situations. That's the alone time. That's the time when you're really testing yourself. All right?
Thank you, sir.
Good? Sir,
All right, so Rodney Jackson from Texas.
from Texas.
West Point, obviously, is who I'm here representing. So as I listened to you talk, the one thing that I was thinking about the most, it seems like people is how you really solve problems. It also seems like we talked about failure, and we know that we have the potential to fail more because we take more risk.
Yeah.
And so we also see that you want to foster a family environment, and everything you do goes along with your team.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you build that resiliency in your teammates? That's all that I was thinking about.
That's great. Tough but fair, right? Tough but fair. And your team gets to know you after a while. And I would say to you, from a problem perspective, the way I look at problems, or how I look at what we need to do in the future, there's really two ways to do it, in my mind. One way is you study your past. You understand Myers-Briggs, you understand how you're wired, you think about your past, and they say, you're good at these three things. You look at that, and from that, you make decisions based on your past. And that sometimes helps you get to what you're trying to accomplish in the future. And your team is a big part of that. The second way of doing it, which is the way I prefer, because I think more and more we're doing things that nobody has ever done before. So relying on your past only recreates your past into the future. And so if you've got a brand new problem, you have to give up your past. You have to know it, you have to honor it, you have to respect it, but you have to say, what is the future outcome that I'm trying to accomplish? And then how do I get there today and make decisions today? And so the team needs to understand that as well. And I'll tell you, the toughest decisions I've had to make as a leader is people who have gotten me to this stage I knew were not part of the people that were going to get me to the future.
Right.
And I said, it's time for that. They're friends, they're colleagues, they're people who have made me successful, they're people who have taught me things. This is not for you anymore. It's time for you to move on. And in some cases, that hurts some of your followers. But in some cases, it enhances some of your followers, because now your followers have an opportunity to step up and lead and do it in their own unique way, in a way that we've never done it before. And so, you know, being straight and direct and being tough and fair and making sure that people understand what your core values are, sometimes you can bring people along with you, and sometimes you can't. And your team understands that, and it makes them better. And they start thinking about what is making them, how are they helping achieving the goal of the future. And so I'm actually better on the second part, because I have actually studied everything about myself in the past. It's pretty boring. And I was like, you know what, if I'm going to accomplish the future that's brand new, and we got to think about it differently. And that's what my team spends an awful lot of time talking about. How do we create a different future than we have today? Make sense?
Totally.
Thank you for your
Thank you.
question. I think I'm out of time. Am I out of time? I'm out of time. I'm sorry. I'll be around so you guys can ask your question, and I know that there was a long line over here. So I'm out of time, so let me, if you're all right, you can sit down and I'll be around afterwards. Let me end by my favorite leadership picture. And this is not whether you believe in God or not. This is George Washington, the man who could have been king, right? At Valley Forge, on his knees, right? Realizing he doesn't have all the answers. This is his alone moment. To me, this is the most powerful picture on leadership in my mind that exists. He doesn't have all the answers, and he's, I'm sure, praying for something an idea, an approach, something that would actually help him out of a terrible situation and help him create the future. This, to me, is all about that alone time that I mentioned. There's no technology in this picture but the horse, and if you guys can figure out how the horse is technology, you get a prize, right? Leadership is really about what's inside. It's about making it real, authentic, and it's about being self-aware and bringing it all to the table. So thank you very much. It's an honor to be here, and I will be here for most of the day today. Okay? So if you've got questions, I'm open for them. Thank you.
So we got a quick gift for you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Mr. Finn, thank you very much for your remarks. On behalf of the 2015 Naval Academy Leadership Conference, we'd like to present you with a small token of our appreciation.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.